KKK burned Bumpy Johnson's club. The Grand Dragon was found floating in the river 4 days later. They burned Bumpy Johnson's club in the dead of night, left a message in ash and fear. Harlem waited for rage. Bumpy only adjusted his hat and let the silence start working. The night was black enough to swallow sound. Flames licked the walls of Bumpy Johnson's club, orange tongues cutting through the Harlem fog. Smoke curled like a warning, twisting over the sidewalks, over the stoops where men whispered and women clutched their children closer. The doors were gone, windows shattered, ash drifting over the cracked concrete like a bitter snowfall. People gathered across the street. Some craned their necks, curious. Others stayed in shadows, eyes wide with something between fear and awe. They knew this wasn't just a fire. It was a message. The Klan had left their signature, a promise of humiliation, a test of the man who ruled these streets with calm authority. Inside, charred remnants of the club's bar sat like relics. Bumpy's chair, the one he always claimed held the room together, was reduced to blackened splinters. Still, the fire had done what it was meant to do, grab attention. But the city knew Bumpy Johnson didn't react the way others did. He arrived after the fire had settled into smoke and embers. No sirens greeted him, no shouting. Just a quiet crackle of dying wood. People stepped aside as he walked down the street, hat low, hands in pockets. Not a muscle twitched, not a word spilled. A few of the braver onlookers whispered to one another. He's going to strike back, isn't he? Bumpy stopped, looking at the wreckage. He tilted his head slightly, taking in every detail. Ash in the cracks, soot coating the windows. The fire had spoken, but Bumpy didn't answer with words. He didn't need to. Harlem watched as he did something far more dangerous than rage. He waited. Silence stretched across the block, heavy, thick, a warning in itself. No one moved. Not the spectators, not the enemy, not even the wind. And in that stillness, a story had already begun, one that wouldn't be written with flames or screams. Bumpy Johnson adjusted his hat, shoulders squared. The city leaned in, and the game, as always, had just begun. Bumpy didn't speak when he entered Harlem the next morning. He didn't need to. His presence carried the authority of every corner he'd ever walked, every street he'd ever controlled. Men nodded without words. Shopkeepers straightened their doors. Children peeked from windows, sensing something bigger than themselves had just passed. He walked slowly, deliberately, as if the city itself had decided to part for him. The smell of smoke still lingered from the club, but Harlem smelled something else too. Calm. Control. Power that didn't raise its voice but filled the air anyway. At the corner where rumors and reality collided, men whispered about what they'd seen the night before. The fire. The insult. But no one mentioned retaliation because no one expected it. Not yet. Bumpy didn't react like the others. He didn't storm. He didn't rage. He simply moved, and the room moved around him. Inside a small cafe, the usual crowd nodded as he passed. One man tried to break the tension with a laugh. It died in his throat. Bumpy's eyes were quiet, but they measured. Each step he took reinforced the invisible line. This street belonged to him, not to fire, not to fear. Even the enemies who had orchestrated the blaze felt it, somewhere deep beneath their arrogance. A room, a block, a city. Sometimes the deadliest power isn't in fists or weapons. It's in the ability to control what people feel without saying a word. Bumpy stopped at the edge of the avenue, watching the neighborhood breathe around him. Every glance, every gesture from Harlem's people was a subtle acknowledgement. This man commands more than loyalty. He commands respect, even from those who want to see him burn. The fire had spoken. The streets had answered. And Bumpy Johnson was the quiet center of it all. The Klan believed silence meant fear. They never understood that with Bumpy Johnson, silence was a weapon. They gathered in a rented hall on the outskirts of the city, smug grins on their faces, a crude map of Harlem spread across the table. Every man in that room thought they had broken something, that a fire had shaken the foundation of a neighborhood and a man who ruled it. They were wrong. Nothing from him yet, one whispered. He'll strike when we least expect it. The others laughed. Loud. careless. Overconfidence hung in the room like smoke. They celebrated prematurely, trading tall tales of dominance, imagining how easily they could crush a man who hadn't even raised a hand. But bumpy streets are never empty. Eyes and ears move in silence. Shadows trace footsteps, and whispers carry faster than any fire. He didn't need to confront them yet. Their arrogance made them predictable, their movements sloppy. Their own pride was already undoing them. Outside Harlem, people spoke cautiously. They think he's waiting to explode, someone said. But he's not. He's letting them show their hand. Back in Hall, the clan's leader, the Grand Dragon, lifted his glass and toasted to imagined victory. Every word, every gesture was recorded by unseen eyes, catalogued by unseen ears. The mistake they made was thinking that quiet meant weakness. Bumpy watched from a distance. He didn't need to enter. He didn't need to threaten. Every misstep they made, every overconfident smile, built a picture. And when the time came, that picture would be enough. Silence stretched. Patience grew. And in that waiting, the power shifted. It always does. Not with noise, not with fire, but with quiet, relentless control. Harlem was alive, but not with chaos. Not yet. It moved like a careful current, flowing around Bumpy Johnson, carrying him and the city together. Every corner, every stoop, every shop front had its silent allegiance. Respect wasn't shouted here. It was earned, and Bumpy had spent years collecting it like quiet currency. Shopkeepers opened their doors wider when he passed. A nod, a glance, nothing more. Everyone knew the rules. Everyone knew the unspoken contract. Loyalty was given freely to those who gave nothing but calm in return. The fire from his club had been more than an attack. It was an insult aimed at the heart of Harlem itself. But the neighborhood didn't panic. They didn't turn on each other. They looked to the man who had always controlled the room, the block, the streets. A mother stepped onto her stoop, her child clutching her leg. Bumpy paused and tipped his hat slightly, a gesture so small it could have been missed. But the boy's eyes widened. He understood. Respect could be shown without words. Power didn't need a roar. Even those who once whispered against him kept quiet. Not out of fear exactly. It was something more permanent, more binding. A promise made silently. You do right by Harlem, and Harlem will do right by you. The clan had misread the city. They thought disrespect would provoke violence. But in Harlem, respect moved like a tide, rising quietly around its guardian. And the neighborhood's loyalty became its own shield, stronger than any weapon, thicker than any fire. Bumpy didn't demand this. He didn't threaten it. He only walked, and Harlem followed. Every glance, every gesture, every careful movement of the city reinforced a truth that no outsider could break. Respect is chosen, not taken. Bumpy Johnson didn't rush. He never did. Not for fire, not for threats, not even for the clan, who now assumed his silence was submission. He walked the perimeter of the block where his club once stood, studying the embers, studying the street, studying the people. Every detail mattered. The way a shadow fell, the way a man's gait shifted when he felt watched. Every slight misstep by the enemy was a clue, a thread to pull. Then, finally he acted, but not with guns, not with fists. Violence lingered just beyond the frame, like a storm brewing but never striking. The clan would never see it coming because Bumpy's weapon was invisible, control, timing, the patience to let arrogance destroy itself. A single message was sent, not written, not spoken, but understood by anyone paying attention. The Grand Dragon was found floating in the river 4 days later. No parade of blood, no noisy revenge, just the city reclaiming itself. Harlem exhaled quietly. Shopkeepers reopened their doors. Children ran down the streets. The rhythm of life resumed but shifted permanently. Those who had underestimated Bumpy understood at last. Calm is the most dangerous weapon of all. It leaves no trace, yet it changes everything. The fire had been a test, the silence a strategy, and the result? Power, undisputed and unchallenged, flowing quietly through the streets. Bumpy Johnson walked away, hat low, shoulders squared. Nothing more needed to be said. Violence had been possible, but it had never been necessary. Control alone had reshaped the story. The river carried him silently, and so did Harlem carry Bumpy. The Grand Dragon's body floated like a warning, but not a shout. Not a spectacle, just a fact. A quiet reckoning that whispered through every corner of the city. People didn't celebrate. They nodded. They stepped carefully around the currents of power that now ran through their streets. Bumpy Johnson had acted, yes, but in a way that preserved order, preserved respect, preserved Harlem itself. Violence had occurred, but it never needed fanfare. The lesson was clear. Misread the man, and the consequences are swift but subtle. The neighborhood adjusted around him. Every shopkeeper, every runner, every elder understood the new balance. They saw how restraint could wield more power than rage, how loyalty born of respect was stronger than fear, and how a single act, silent, precise, could secure a legacy. Bumpy returned to his life as if nothing had happened. He moved through Harlem with the same measured pace, tipping his hat to a child, nodding to a store owner, pausing just long enough to let the city know he was still its anchor. The fire, the insult, the enemy, they all floated away like memories of a storm. What remained was far stronger. Harlem itself had been reinforced, and Bumpy Johnson's name became untouchable. Not because of fear, not because of chaos, but because of calm, because of restraint, because of power exercised with precision. The city whispered his story, not in headlines, not in celebrations, but in quiet acknowledgement. This is the man who commanded the streets without raising his voice, who let silence do the work of thunder, who left a legacy that would float far longer than bodies or flames. Bumpy Johnson had shown that true power is not in what you destroy, it's in what endures. And in Harlem, that truth floated higher than any river, deeper than any fire, untouchable and eternal.